President Biden delivered remarks on the May jobs report. I want to bring in ABC News political director Rick Klein and business correspondent Deirdre Bolton for a little bit more on this. Deirdre, the president is painting a pretty rosy picture of the economy and how things are looking after this jobs report, which, granted, was much better than the previous month. But the previous month's numbers were very low. So overall, what is the picture here, especially considering the jobs report this month was still below expectations?
It certainly was, Diana. And I think what this shows is what the president said. We are on the right track. But given the shock that we had to our economy, this isn't like a light switch where you just flip on the switch, all the jobs come back. I mean, we're still missing more or less about 7.5 million jobs from the U.S. economy if you look to where we are now versus February 2020. So Congress has been amazing. Both former President Trump and President Biden have really passed these big muscular measures, which is making our economic recovery better and faster than it was after the last shock in from 2007 to 2009, where it took us a decade, Diane, to get all of the jobs back. So most economists that I'm speaking with say, look, the recovery is going to be faster, but it is not a straight line up. So I think most people that I was speaking with this morning say today's figures were a modest disappointment. The one thing that I think we can underline, which is a bright spot, is the fact that jobs added were revised higher for the previous 2 months. So it's showing you that the trend is moving higher. We're moving in the right direction. It's just going to take time, Diane.
And Rick, there's a lot in it right now for Biden because, one, we know that the market is a lot of psychology, essentially. If people feel confident, they're more likely to spend, they're more likely to invest. And also, he's trying to get more bills through Congress to help in terms of economic relief. So what is he trying to do with this speech today?
Yeah, Diane, this is a pivotal day for his infrastructure plan. He referenced just at the end of those remarks his meeting later this afternoon with the chief Republican negotiator on the Senate side, Senator Shelley Moore Capito of West Virginia. And that could be a make or break moment for bipartisanship when it comes to infrastructure and really whether infrastructure can happen at all. And the message he's been trying to deliver and using today's jobs numbers to try to reinforce is the economy is on the move and it needs more attention. You can't give up now. It's an odd kind of political box that he's in, because if the numbers are too high, if it feels like the economy is too overheated, you hear inflation concerns and more skepticism about the need or the wisdom of dumping additional trillions of dollars into the economy. But that trajectory is important, and he's got some good numbers to hype. You heard him making all sorts of comparisons to previous presidents. I feel like all of that is of a piece to the argument that he's making to maybe some jittery Democrats, as well as some Republicans who definitely want to see COVID ended and want to see us on the other side of the economic recovery, that Biden's economic policies are working. And that's difficult. You live by the numbers, you die by the numbers as a politician. But today you're hearing him say this at a time where his agenda is in the balance.
And Deirdre, there are still millions of Americans looking for work right now. So what industries right now seem to be doing the most hiring? Where should people who need work be looking?
Well, the big standout is in leisure and hospitality, and we got even a data point yesterday that showed that very clearly. It's not a huge surprise. This was really the sector that was hardest hit during the pandemic. So this is where there is the most growth. So if people are looking for jobs, leisure and hospitality, that whole entire restaurant, bar, hotel, travel sector, they would like to hire you. The other place that we're seeing a lot of growth is in healthcare, and there's sort of a nod to non-essential procedures. So think about dentists, or think about maybe your shoulder hurt during the pandemic, but not enough to go see a doctor. Now people are beginning to take on those appointments. That means doctors are bringing in more and more of their staff. The third area that's seeing the most hiring is actually trade and transport, very much linked to retail. So as more and more stores open, they need more goods, and that is sort of part of this supply chain. And we are seeing jobs and companies that are in those spaces almost downright desperate for workers, Diane.
And on the flip side to that, Deirdre, there are a lot of companies that are out there saying, listen, we're trying to hire. We're putting the help wanted sign up. We're putting the ads out there, and we cannot find people to take the job. So I kind of want to get both of your take on this, because this is both an economic argument, but it's also turned into a political discussion. So first, Deirdre, I want to go to you on what economists are saying about this. The fact that there are companies out there in this economy, millions of people looking for work, and yet all these companies trying to hire saying they can't find anyone to take the job.
Diane, to be sure, it is a puzzle. Everyone that I speak with is trying to have the right inputs to get kind of the right formula. But it's not just a single, there's a job open, we need workers, and then there's workers. Sometimes people have left the workforce, and even if that person is ready to come back, that exact job may not be available. There are still people concerned for health reasons. Maybe they live with somebody who is immunocompromised. Not every state has followed the same guidelines. So I do think, thank goodness, we seem, touch wood, to be past the worst in the pandemic, but health concerns are still on the forefront of many Americans' minds. You also have childcare, which remains clearly an outstanding issue. Some schools are not open yet. Some daycares are not open yet, or not open at the same hours that they once were. And for many people, that does remain a challenge. So I think those two factors do have to be added in to the overall equation, Diane.
So, Rick, how does that all factor in on Washington? Because you've got a lot of people, particularly Republicans, pointing to the COVID relief bill, bolstered unemployment benefits, all those kind of safety nets, and saying, essentially, people are now making so much money not working that you've taken away the incentive for them to go out and get a job. So how does that work with some of the legislation before Congress now?
Yeah, this is actually, I think, a pretty important political point, and I think it's become a talking point on both sides of the conversation. And I think Deirdre's point is very relevant here as well. We're at a period where the country is not fully opened, and there are many, many school children, millions of them, who are not back full time, and that means families have to make adjustments around schedules. I think in the summer months, with camps restarting, it's still going to be an issue. I think by the fall, it'll be clear that the country is back to work, and if people are not willing to work, then you have to address that in a different way. But the Biden administration has been very strong in trying to push back at the notion that unemployment remains at any kind of level because people don't want to work. These are people that want jobs, and people are really still hurting in so many spheres of healthcare system as well as the broader economy. But it's tempered by the fear of spending too much and doing too much, and it does impact the day-to-day politics now at this critical juncture for the Biden presidency.
And you heard Biden mention child care relief in that speech. He says he's dedicating $39 billion. Rick, can you tell us a little bit more about that plan and what he's aiming to do there?
Sure, and this is a broad thinking about what infrastructure means, as we discussed previously, Diane. The White House has a view of infrastructure as more than roads and bridges. They call it human infrastructure. Where you want to find that in the dictionary, the idea is, though, you need to support people in ways that they work, and that a new economy, a 21st century economy, requires that sort of innovation, and that, yeah, bringing childcare to people. We've seen it rolled out through some of the COVID vaccinations as well, to try to find ways to patch holes just on a day-to-day basis. It is an urgent concern. If more people be working, if it was addressed. I think it's going to be hard to get any political support for this, though, until or unless you have some bipartisan buy-in on the other pieces of infrastructure, and that's why this becomes a key choice for Biden. If he wants to get the other broader ideas around infrastructure and childcare done, he may have to take a smaller deal.
And Deirdre, we have heard time and time again, particularly before things started looking better in the pandemic, at least, that the big mistake would be not to spend enough, not to pump enough money into the economy, and then that would be much more detrimental than the fears of putting too much money into the economy. But up until that point, the dangers of inflation had been largely ignored. Now we're seeing investors become a lot more cautious about that. So how does that balance strike on Wall Street when you've got Congress debating a lot more spending?
Well, I think your point is well taken, Diane, in that I think Congress as a whole realized that for example, from the last economic shock that we had, it took 10 years. It took a decade to get all those jobs back added into the economy. No one wanted to go through that again. So I do think that's why we have seen so much public spending and so much support. And there's very few economists, honestly, who at this point would disagree with more and faster is better. And this is part of the reason why we are moving in the right direction as for this economic rebound as quickly as we are, even if there are a few bumps in the road. But going forward, I think one of the points that people are making about inflation is that this number today, let's call it tepid. You see the markets up, not that we have to live and die by the reactions of investors, but the Fed has telegraphed pretty clearly that it is going to hold steady, and that, yes, some areas may see some inflationary pressures, but it seems as if the Fed is going to wait until the economy is showing a lot more strength before, for better or worse, being concerned about inflationary pressures, Diane.
And then finally, I wanted to ask you about supply chain issues, because the president mentioned that in his speech today, and this is something that affects all of us. If you're trying to buy a computer, if you're trying to buy a car, I mean, you name it, it seems like there's so many things that are hitting supply chain issues, particularly when it comes to computer chips. So, Deirdre, what is the update on that situation now? Because this is affecting so many different products and prices.
It sure is, Diane. Goldman Sachs put out a research note a week ago saying here are the 170 industries that are being affected by a shortage of semiconductors. So to your point, it is affecting so many products, ones that we buy every day. You mentioned computers, cars, I mean, breweries. There is not one business that is untouched by this. And it is one of the economic lessons from the pandemic is just how fragile the global supply chain, in fact, was. We see it most with cars. I mean, if you speak with people in the auto industry, they say, yeah, there's no way that this is really going to all be resolved by the end of this year. Optimistically, most analysts are looking for it to be resolved in the first quarter of next year. Again, it's this idea of a light switch. Just because you can bring workers back to factories, there are other elements involved, including transport, including just quirks of every single industry. And it just takes a little bit of time. I feel like a good analogy is, sitting by somebody who is trying to learn how to drive in a manual car, like a stick shift car. I feel like you're moving forward. Our economy is moving forward. There's just going to be a lot of stops and starts along the way, Diane.
I remember when I was learning how to drive stick shift, it was far from a smooth ride, Deirdre. And so, Rick, we heard the president bring up the supply chain issues today. What is he trying to put forward in order to address that?
Well, first, I never learned to drive stick, so I wouldn't recommend it necessarily one way or the other. I think, look, I think there's actually been a new effort in assuring supply chain in a slightly different angle as well. I've mentioned the recent cyber attacks on critical pieces of the infrastructure, everything from transportation to meat to, of course, electrical grid and water grid and things like that. This has become a big issue up and down the economy, and I think you're seeing this White House trying to deliver on promises of building back from the middle, trying to build back a working class, and to assure businesses that they're going to have whatever they need whenever they need it, and Americans whatever they have and whenever they need it. And I think, look, these are complicated challenges that aren't going to be solved very quickly. And I think you're starting to see, though, the contours of a broad Biden economic approach come into view. And when they have numbers like these that are good enough to tout, they will tout them, but also know that there's a lot more that has to get done.
All right, Rick Klein and Deirdre Bolton, great to have you both. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.